I'm now going to give you a trading exercise that will integrate these truths about the market at a functional level into your mental environment. It'll help to distill trading down to its simplest form, and this is what I would say about that. It is a pattern recognition numbers game. We use market analysis to identify the patterns, define the risk, and determine to take profits. The trade either works or it doesn't. In any case, we go on to the next trade. It's that simple, but it's certainly not easy. The goal here, my goal for you, is to build the kind of trading skills that will create consistent results. The definition of consistent results, to me, is a steadily rising equity curve with only minor drawdowns that are the natural consequence of edges that didn't work. So, observe yourself. When it comes to personal transformation, the only important ingredients are your willingness to change, the clarity of your intent, and the strength of your desire. Ultimately, for this process to work, you must choose consistency over every other reason or justification you have for trading. If all of these ingredients are sufficiently present, then regardless of the internal obstacles you find yourself up against, what you desire will eventually prevail. The first step in the process of creating consistency is to start noticing what you're thinking, saying, and doing. Why? Because everything we think, say, or do as a trader contributes to and therefore reinforces some belief in our mental system. The idea is eventually to learn to become an objective observer of your own thoughts, words, and deeds. Your first line of defense against committing a trading error is to catch yourself thinking about it. Of course, the last line of defense is to catch yourself in the act. If you don't commit yourself to becoming an observer to these processes, your realizations will always come after the experience, usually when you're in a state of deep regret and frustration. If producing consistent results is a function of eliminating errors, then it is an understatement to say that you will encounter great difficulty in achieving your objective if you can't acknowledge a mistake. Obviously, this is something very few people can do, and it accounts for why there are so few consistent winners. In fact, the tendency not to acknowledge a mistake is so pervasive throughout mankind, it could lead one to assume that it's an inherent characteristic of human nature. In other words, you're surrounded by competitive traders that are competing for the same rewards as you. Almost none of them can acknowledge a mistake. Think about the edge you gain on them if you learn and consistently implement this one idea: observe, acknowledge, and correct your mistakes. So learn to watch yourself as if you were in a theater, observing you as an actor in a movie or stage play. It's the only way you can even come close to being objective other than have a coach look over your shoulder. If you're going to become a consistent winner, mistakes can't exist in the kind of negatively charged context in which most people hold them. You have to be able to monitor yourself to some degree, and that'll be difficult to do if you have the potential to experience emotional pain if and when you find yourself in the process of making an error. If this potential exists, you have two choices. One, you can work on acquiring a new set of positively charged beliefs about what it means to make a mistake, along with deactivating any negatively charged beliefs that would argue otherwise or cause you to think less of yourself for making a mistake. Two, if you find this first choice undesirable, you can compensate for the potential to make errors by the way you set up your trading regime. This means that if you're going to trade and not monitor yourself, but at the same time you desire consistent results, then trading exclusively in a mechanical way may resolve the dilemma. Now, The sole purpose of trading mechanically is to transform yourself into a consistently successful trader. If there's anything in your mental environment that's in conflict with the principles of creating the belief that, quote, I am a consistently successful trader, then you will need to use self-discipline to integrate these principles as a dominant, functioning part of your identity. Once the principles become who you are, you will no longer need self-discipline because the process of being consistent will become effortless. For example, predefining your risk is a step in the process of being consistent. If it takes any special effort to predefine your risk, if you have to consciously remind yourself to do it, if you experience any conflicting thoughts, in other words, in essence, trying to talk yourself out of doing it, or if you find yourself in a trade where you haven't predefined your risk, then this principle is not a dominant functioning part of your identity. It isn't who you are. If it were, it wouldn't even occur to you not to predefine your risk. The following sub-beliefs are the building blocks that provide the underlying structure for what it means to be a consistent winner. You must say to yourself, I am a consistent winner because 1, I objectively identify my edges. 2, I predefine the risk of every trade. 3, I completely accept the risk, or I'm willing to let go of the trade. 4, I act on my edges without reservation or hesitation. 5, I pay myself as the market makes money available to me. 6, I continually monitor my susceptibility for making errors. And 7, I understand the absolute necessity of these principles of consistent success, and therefore I never violate them. These beliefs are the 7 principles of consistency, and you ought to write them down somewhere. To integrate them into your mental system at a functional level requires that you purposely create a series of experiences that are consistent with them. In other words, you simply have to ingrain them in your system by employing self-discipline in spite of everything inside of you that argues otherwise until they become, quote, who you are, unquote. You may have trouble exercising the self-discipline necessary for this transformation. This is understandable but inexcusable if you really want to achieve this goal. In English, we have a familiar saying, quote, make up your mind, end quote. The implication of making up your mind is that you decide exactly what you want with so much clarity, absolutely no lingering doubts, and with so much conviction that literally nothing stands in your way, either internally or externally. If there's enough force behind your resolve, it's possible to experience a major shift in your mental structure virtually instantaneously. So make up your mind. Do you want it or not? If you can't make up your mind to think like a trader, then make this your last stop at this website. In fact, I would advise you to consider another path to your financial independence.